Hello my dear students, a very good morning to each and every one of you. The topic for our discussion for today is traditional political institutions in Northeast India. It is a very vast topic, so I'm confused where to start and where to end. But somehow I decided to pick up some of the important traditional political institutions that we have in Northeast India. Out of 8 states that we have, I touch upon 7 states, and from there we will understand, or we will try to understand, the main traditional political institutions among the tribal people. Towards the end, I will also touch upon the youth dormitory system or bachelor's dormitory system of some of the tribes of Northeast India. I won't be able to touch upon all of them, but I have selected 4 tribes which I will be discussing about them towards the end. Since the topic is quite vast, the lecture is also slightly long. I hope you will bear with me. Though it is long, I won't be able to give the slides in detail. So just listen the lecture first, and if possible I'll give you the notes by next week. When I give you the notes, I hope you will understand the issue clear in a better way, because in this video it will be just a brief introduction of the political institutions that the tribal people had since time immemorial. It will be a simple introduction and it will not be a detailed discussion. So when I give you the notes, only then I hope you will be able to understand more. As of now, I'll try to explain the different traditional political institutions that some of the major tribal groups of Northeast India have, in as brief as I can. This is a map of Northeast India and an image created by some social media users demanding a chapter on Northeast India at the national curriculum. Just by seeing this, we can understand that Northeast India is made up of different communities, different tribal groups, having different cultures, following different religion, traditions, language, etc., etc. There are more than 200 tribal communities in Northeast India. So it is quite impossible to understand the traditional political systems of each and every tribal communities. So we will try to understand only some of the major tribes. We will not be able to touch upon every tribe, so we will just focus on some of the general and more popular tribes. Now, to begin with, let us give a brief introduction of Northeast India. Let me go as quick as possible. Northeast India comprises of 8 states, namely Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland, Manipur, Sikkim, and Tripura. All these states have a remarkable number of tribal population. Tribal populations may be grouped into plain tribal and hill tribal. To the hill tribal, a policy of minimal political interference was followed by the British. None of the political reform introduced extended to the hill tribal of Northeast India. Meaning to say, during the colonial period, most of the administrations were not extended to the tribal areas. As such, a variety of local self-governing institutions with their associated participatory structures and processes existed among the hill tribes. In this lecture, we will discuss some of the traditional political institutions among different tribes, or among major tribes of Northeast India. Now let's begin with the chieftainship system among the Kuki-Chin tribes. To begin with, the Kuki-Chin communities are a conglomerate of different tribes residing mainly in Manipur, Assam, Tripura, Mizoram, Meghalaya, and Nagaland. Of course, in Mizoram they are called Mizo, and in other places they are called Kuki, and in some places they are also called Zomi, Zo, and other names. But in Myanmar they are called mainly Chin. So in this particular section we will briefly introduce the type of chieftainship that the Kuki Chin communities have, particularly focusing on the Thado Kuki communities. Now, chieftainship in general. Chieftainship is a common traditional political institution among many of the tribes of Northeast India. Chieftainship is not only found among the Kuki Chin communities, but it is also found in many of the other communities. Among the Kuki Chin Mizo groups and some tribes among the Nagas like Semas and Konyaks, hereditary chief possesses executive, legislature, and judicial power in the village. There are two types of chieftainship. One is hereditary, which is found among the Chin Kuki Mizo groups and some Naga tribes like Semas and Konyaks. And there are also elected or selected chieftainship system, which are found in many of the Naga tribes. Among the tribes having hereditary chieftainship, the chief appointed members of the council of elders to assist him in the village administration. Council of elders was chosen from among the subject who possessed tact and wisdom and who was well versed with customary laws and usages of the people. Now, let's come to the chieftainship system among the Kuki Chin tribes. Chieftainship is the most common traditional political institutions among the Kuki Chin communities. It is not only the most common but also the most powerful traditional institutions. The chief decided both civil and criminal cases according to the customary law of the village. His decisions are final in all matters. Of course, he usually don't act in his own will. He have to consult his council of ministers, but in most cases, his decisions or his words are final. He is the traditional village head, having authority to enact laws and at the same time execute these laws at his discretion. Theoretically, all powers were vested in the hands of the chief, yet in practice, he would never try any case without consulting his council. A chief who governed strictly according to custom could do almost everything he liked without losing his followers, but a weak chief who tried petty tyrannies soon found himself without any subject. The Kuki Chin people were known for the strong despotic and hereditary chief who rule over the people. In other words, the chief of the Kuki Chin people are often despotic and hereditary. Their institution of chieftainship was generally viewed as autocratic. Therefore, the institution is often viewed as autocratic. This doesn't mean that there is also element of democratic principles as well. As compared to many of the chief of other tribes, the Kuki Chin tribes has a very strong, a very powerful chieftainship system, but it also has its own elements of democratic principles. The chief is the patriarchal and feudal. He retains absolute authority over village, land, and the villagers. In other words, he is the absolute authority or the supreme authority over the village and the land. The relationship between him and the villagers is asymmetrical to feudal relations seen between landlords and tenants. In other words, the relationship between the village chief and the villagers is similar to that of feudal relationship which is found between landlords and tenants. His word are the law. Villagers could settle in the village so long as they pleased the chief. This system is considered antithetical to the practice of democracy. In short, villagers have no freedom. Their fate is decided by the chief. However, in practice, the chief draw their power from the long observed customs and traditions. Now, let's shift to chieftainship among the Mizo society. The Mizos are also part of the Kuki-Chin Mizo community, but since they have a separate state and they become one of the main stakeholders in the Norris, I'll try to discuss about the chieftainship of the Mizo society in separate section. Chieftainship among the Mizo society. When the British annexed the countries of the Mizos, they were surprisingly amazed to find large number of village units of administration running independently of one another and or headed by a chief of immense local standing. When the British came to Lusai Hills, the present Mizoram state, they were surprised to see well-administered village administration among the Mizos. However, it is not possible to state clearly when and how in the past this institution took such a concrete state or concrete shape. Now, position of the Lusai chief or the Mizo chief. The chief was usually called Lal, which means in Mizo a lord. He maintained his position more through his personal qualities than hereditary rights. The chief position in the village was indeed that of a benevolent ruler. All those who live in the village were looked upon as his own children. Though the chief is the supreme authority, though he is the most powerful institutions in the village, still he is a benevolent ruler. All the villagers are looked upon by the chief as his own children. The chief is bound to help them in their adversities, counsel them in their difficulties, reward them in their achievements, and punish them when they were found guilty or misdeeds or infringement of established customs. The villagers on their turn were to obey his orders, simply implicitly carry out errands assigned to them individually and collectively, and have the chief in all possible ways. This means that the chief will always help the villagers in terms of crisis or in terms of difficulties or whenever they are in need of such help. And at the same time, the villagers also in return will obey the order of the chief and will do whatever they can for the chief. The chief commanded respect in return of the admiration or administration they carried out over the subjects. The Silo clans who established their chiefship claims that they came out of the space between the moon and the sun. Just to strengthen their authority, they claim that the Silo chief claimed that they come from space between the moon and the sun. Killing of a Silo chief was the most heinous crime in the days, and a Silo captured in a raid shouldn't be enslaved nor killed according to convention. The chief was exercising judicial powers, including power of life and death. Being the protector and father of the subjects, he leads the war party in war times. He appointed important officers of the village like council of elders, blacksmiths, priests, and village crier. Now, rights and privileges of the Mizo chief. The chief, as the supreme authority of the Mizo society, enjoy rights and privileges which may be summed up as under. He has the right to make all his trusted sons a chief by dividing his land between his sons. He was the rightful owner of all lands within his jurisdiction. All the lands belong to the chief, or all the land is under the control of the chief. He was entitled for free labor from the village for the construction and repairing of his house. He was also entitled to Touthang, 1 to 3 baskets of paddy from every household in the village at the end of every year. Different kinds of taxes known as chia were entitled to him, with meat tax, bee tax, salt tax, feast tax, etc. He had the right to collect additional quantities of paddy from Ramho and Jalian, those men of position in the village who were exempted from paddy tax. He was entitled to keep special priests called Sadot to perform religious functions for the sake of subjects. He had the right to confiscate half of paddy from the migrated villagers without permission. In short, the chief of the Mizos have so many rights and privileges during those days. However, we should remember that the chief in Mizoram, or the institutions of chieftainship in Mizoram, is no longer as relevant as in present now. I mean, most of the institutions or elements of chieftainship has been abolished among the Mizo society. Now let's come to the chieftainship system or village administration of the Naga Hills, which is sometimes called extreme democracy. Extreme democracy in the Naga Hills. Naga society presents a varied pattern of near dictatorship and extreme democracy. Among the Kuki-Chin communities, the chieftainship system is more or less the same among all the tribes. Of course, some of the tribes have already stopped practicing the institution of chieftainship as it was in the past. But traditionally, most of the tribes have more or less the same chieftainship system. But among the Nagas, it is different. One tribe will have totally different chieftainship system or village administration from the other. Here it is given very clearly that Naga society presents a varied pattern of near dictatorship. Some of the tribes have a very strong chieftainship system, which is near dictatorship, and some of them have a very democratic kind of village administration or near extreme democracy. There is a system of hereditary chieftainship among the Semas and Changs. Some tribes have hereditary chieftainship like the Kuki-Chin communities. The Koneaks have very powerful chief or angs who are regarded as sacred and whose word is law. Before the greatest of them, no commoner may stand upright. The Koneaks have chief so powerful that a common man will not be standing up in front of the chief. Among the Naga tribes, the chief is the head of the village and enjoy certain privilege and special status. However, despite having the highest authority in the village, the people's obedience and authority he enjoyed is subjected to conformity to the well-established customs and traditions and the consent of the village council. Now, even if the chief is very powerful, even if he is the head of the village, even if he enjoys certain privilege and special status, he cannot act according to his personal choice. He has to always listen to the village council and also the customs and traditions the particular tribe has. And his primary purpose should also always be for the well-being of his subjects. The chief can be very easily deposed by the whole village by a decision arrived at by the village council only when he seriously violates the forbidden things and customs even after having been warned. Now, since many of the Naga tribes have elected or selected chiefship, the chief can be replaced or the chief can be deposed in case he committed serious crime or serious mistakes. During the earlier days, when law and order was not established, chieftainship was largely seen as leadership ability to protect the village. In other words, it is the duty of the chief to protect the village. The chieftainship was hereditary in the family of the man who originally founded the village, but did not at all necessarily passed from father to son. The most suitable man became chief by force of character. His main function was that of a leader in war, and his perquisite all the spoils brought home from raids. In many instances, the government of every Naga tribe is purely democratic, and whenever anything of public importance has to be undertaken, all the chiefs meet together in solemn conclave and then discuss and decide upon the action to be taken. And even then, it often happens that the minority will not be bound by either the wish or act of the majority, and as to say, one single chief exercising absolute control over his people, the thing is unheard of. According to some experts, in most cases, the Nagas follows some sort of democratic principles in arriving at important decisions. On the other hand, the Aw and Tangku villages are governed by bodies of elders representing the principal kinders in the village, while the Angami, Rengma, and Lhota, and apparently Sangtam villages are run on lines of democracy. This means that among the many tribes of the Nagas, some of the tribes are governed by chiefship, some of the tribes are governed by elected or selected headmen, but some of the tribes are also ruled by democratic principles. The traditional political institutions of the Naga society has been the sovereign village state, which has different forms of government. So the most important, all the traditional political institutions of the Naga society is or has been the sovereign village state. In Naga society, the authority of village council plays an important role in the village administration. As in the case of Angamis, where there is no village council at all, but every villager joins in the discussion and has the right to speak, as in a system of direct democracy. Among the Angamis, it is interesting to note that they don't have village council, but all the villagers would come together, sit together and discuss on important matters, as in the case of direct democracy. But in most of the tribes, the village council has an important role to play in the village administration. Now, let's come to the Siams, Dolores, and Aking Nokmas of Meghalaya. As we know, in Meghalaya, there are three major tribes: the Khasis, the Gentiles, and the Garos. The Khasis has a very important traditional administrative system called Siams. The Gentiles has Dolores, and the Garos has a King Nokmas. Now let us see these three traditional institutions one by one. The Hindu tribe and Atchik people of Meghalaya, despite being matrilineal society, are closely akin to the village administrative systems found in other tribal societies of the region. The Siams, Dolores, and Aking Nokmas were chief in the traditional political institutions among the Khasi, Gentia, and Garo, yet they had no control over the land which the community of clans in a village largely controls it. Now, let's go back to what happened among the Kukichin Mizo communities. Among the Kukichin Mizo communities, the chief controlled the land, the village, and even the villagers. But in Meghalaya, though they have the chief or chief in the tribe, the chief doesn't own or control the land because the land belongs to the community. The chief cannot do anything over land without the consent of the villagers or his council of ministers or whatever is applicable. Now, Siams of the Khasi tribe. The Khasi tribe are not only one of the major tribes in Meghalaya, but also one of the most advanced tribes in the entire Norris India. The Khasi occupy mainly the Shillong and its adjoining areas. The Khasi were more advanced than other tribes because Shillong was for a long time the capital of Assam. I mean, during the British period and even after India's independence, it was the capital of Assam for quite some time. That is why many of the educational institutions and developmental works were undertaken first in Shillong. That is why the Khasis were much more advanced than many of the other tribes of Northeast India. Now, the traditional Khasi polity is a three-tier system. At the lowest level, it is the village with a traditional council of all mere elders called Dobar Snong, presided by the Rongba Sanong or the headman. In other words, the Khasi people have three-tier traditional political system, and at the lowest level or at the bottom they have the village. The village is the lowest level of governance and a village level assembly of the Khasis around which the life of the community is organized. Above the Darbar Snong is the Durbar Red. At the lowest level, at the village level, they have Durbar Snong, and at the second level, they have Durbar Red, which is presided over by an elected headman known as Basra or Lindo or Silda. And above the Durbar Red, or at the apex, there is the Darbar Hima or the State Assembly presided by the Siam. The entire Khasi Hills is traditionally constituted into 25 Khasi states. Each state is headed by a chief, Darbar or Siam's Darbar, who are at the top of the hierarchy. The head of the Khasi state is the Siam or chief. A Khasi state is a limited monarchy, the Siam's powers being much circumscribed. According to custom, he can perform no act of any importance without first consulting and obtaining the approval of his Darbar, upon which the state mantris sit. In short, the Khasi people have three-tier or three-layer of administration, or three-level of administration. At the top, they have the state assembly, which is known as Darbar Hima, and the traditional Khasi society has 25 Khasi states, and the head of these states is known as Siam's Darbar, or simply Siams. The Siam is nothing but the chief of the tribe. Now let's come to the Dolores of the Gentiles. In Gentia Hills, the 12 Dolores rule over their people, who are usually elected from among the other male members of the original or founding clan or clans of the Erka or province. Now, the Gentia tribes, the Gentia community have 12 Dolores who rule over the people. Now, these Dolores are in fact at the middle of the three-tile system. As in the case of Khasi tribe, the Gentia tribe also has three-tile traditional administrative systems, and these Dolores are in the middle. The Raja is at the top or above the Dolores, and the Wahek Snong or the village headman is at the bottom, or Wahek Snong or the village headman is below Dolores. At the bottom they have Wahek Snong, at the second level they have Dolores, and at the top they have Raja or the chief of the tribe. All decisions have to be democratically approved by all the people. Though they have someone called head, or the head of the tribe, or the head of the village, all important decisions are to be taken democratically with the approval of the people. Now let's come to the King Nokmas of the Garo Hills. The Garos are one of the major tribes of Meghalaya. In fact, they are the most populous tribes in Meghalaya. Even the present Chief Minister of Meghalaya is from the Garo community. The administration of a Garo village also closely exhibits the characteristics features of other tribes. Its Garo village is an autonomous political unit with Nokma as head of the village, holding socio-political authority. Now, the Garo, like the other tribes, have their own traditional administrative system. In the traditional administrative system, the village is an autonomous political unit with Nokma as head of the village or chief of the village, holding socio-political authority. Before the advent of the British, Garo Hills was divided into hundreds of kings. It's a small kingdom of 10-15 villages. In other words, before the British came to Norris India, the Garo country was divided into so many kingdoms, having about 10-15 villages. Each of these kingdoms were headed by a chief or a king called kings. They are all independent of each other and subjects to none. They were independent of each other. They were not controlled by any authority. All the civil and criminal cases were tried and settled by the tribal chief known as a King Nokmas, assisted by the village Nokmas and their councils. Now, we have just discussed that the Nokma is the head of the village authority or village administration. Now, the King Nokma is the head of the tribe or that particular kingdom. So, all civil and criminal cases were tried by the tribal chief or the chief of the Garo tribe known as King Nokmas. But in all of his decisions, he is always assisted by the Nokmas or the head of the village and their councils. The proceedings of the cases were not recorded, and every decision and judgments were oral but binding on the offender. The village elders took part in the Mila Bichar or meeting to argue the cases and gave decisions according to the customary laws and practices. Whenever any important matter arises, particularly whenever there is civil or criminal cases coming up, all the village elders will come together, they will have meeting, and they will decide according to the customary laws and practices. Among the Garos, the lands were owned by a King Nokmas or the clan chief and administered by the chief and his council of elders, in which the administrations were carried in accordance with customs and traditions. Now, as in the case of many other tribes, among the Garos also, the land ownership belongs to the chief or the clan chief. And this clan chief or the King Nokmas or the chief of those kingdoms control the land or administer the land with the help of his council of ministers based on customs and traditions. Though they are the owner of the land, though they own the land, they cannot do whatever they want. Instead, they have to always consult their council of ministers and at the same time follow the customs and traditions. Village is the main traditional unit of administration in which the village council, which consists of all the senior villagers, governs the village. All cases were tried by the Nokma chief and his council of elders in an open assembly. Now let's come to the Montpar Councils and Kebangs of Arunachal Pradesh. Now, we all know that Arunachal Pradesh is geographically the largest state in Norris India. It is even bigger than Assam. But in terms of population density and others, it is far behind many of the other states because the geographical location and the topographical landscape of Arunachal Pradesh is quite different from other states of Norris India. There are so many tribes or communities living in Arunachal Pradesh, and among these I have chosen two tribes and their traditional administrative systems for our discussion today. The traditional authority systems of the tribal societies of Arunachal Pradesh varied greatly in character and effectiveness. They range from the role of hereditary and autocratic chief among the Wansus to the systems of councils known as Kebang prevailing among most of the Adi tribes. There are so many tribes in Arunachal Pradesh. Some of them have very autocratic and hereditary chief, but some of the tribe are administered by councils known as Kebang in the case of Adi tribes. The unit of administration of an Arunachali tribe is always a village. As in the case of many other hill tribe communities, the village is always the unit of administration for the Arunachali tribe as well. Among the various communities in Arunachal Pradesh, the Monpas and Adi tribes have one of the most democratic indigenous practices in the village governance system. And we will be discussing now the village administrative system of the Monpas and Adi tribes, who have one of the most democratic indigenous practices in Arunachal Pradesh. Now let's start with the Montpar Councils. The Monpas mainly settle in the Kameng region, western districts of Tawang and West Kameng. They are also found in Bhutan and Tibet, and they are one of the recognized ethnic groups in China. In other words, the Monpas live in the border areas of trans-border areas of Tibet, China, and Arunachal Pradesh. They are also found in Bhutan. The Monpar Councils. The Monpas of Kameng have a well-developed village of self-governing institutions. The village council exercise power in a very democratic manner since the 11th century. Its Monpar village elects a leader who not only represented the people but was also directly responsible to the people and to the Kis. Thus the Kis eventually become a titular head of the Monpas and also the protector of the community from any external attack. The elected Sobla was the contact person for any events for the community as a whole. He is also given the responsibility of supervising the shrines and ensures that religious ceremonies are held. This particular area is not very clear, so when I give the notes it will be clear, I guess. Now, Kebangs of the Adi tribe. The Adi tribe in the then Siang Frontier Division or various Siang districts of Arunachal Pradesh is by nature democratic. They have a village council called Kebangs for hundreds of years, through which the society is governed either by noctes or by village elders. Its village of the Adis is self-governing and an independent administration with legislative and executive powers. In Adi society, laws are framed by the people, sanctioned by the council, and promulgated by the president. Now, among the Adi tribe, they have a village council called Kebangs, or a village administrative system called Kebangs. And here they have the president or the head, they have the council, and they have the people. Now all the laws that are to be followed are met by the people democratically, and these laws are sanctioned by the council and finally promulgated or implemented by the president. In other words, the Adi tribes has a very democratic kind of village administration. This council, that is the Kebang, is a daily functional council in the sense that every evening all men of the village gather in the council room to discuss issues that matters, to inform each other of what was seen and heard, to discuss political questions put forward by one of the chief, to decide what the village will do the next day. The village council is responsible for every day-to-day activities or discussions. Apart from being a legislative and administrative council, the Kebang of Adi also acts as a judiciary. It has a council of elders which exercises the highest legal and judicial powers, and all issue or dispute arising over social and natural resources is dealt with through the Kebang. In short, the village administration or the village council of the Adi tribe called Kebang is responsible for every political, legislative, executive, judiciary functions. The village council or the kebang is responsible to exercise all these angles of administration. However, the limitation of kebang is that it did not provide space for women in the council, as women cannot even set foot in the council room. Though it is very democratic, everyone can participate in the council, the only issue is that women are not allowed in the kebang. It is only a male dominated village council. Now let's come to the Zumsa of Sikkim. As we all know, Sikkim is the smallest state in Northeast India, and it is also one of the smallest states in the whole of India. But they still have so many tribes and communities. Out of this, I selected the Zumsa tribes, the Zumsas of Sikkim. The traditional local self-government system in Lachung is called the Zumsa. This system exists in adjoining Lachen Valley in North Sikkim also. In other words, the Zumsa administrative system is found only in few areas of Sikkim, and it is confined to just one particular community. The term Zumsa literally means a gathering place, a council of villagers assigned with the duty of carrying out the administration of village community. Now, structure of Zumsa in Lachung. We have to see the structure of this administrative system in Lachung. For the administrative function, 8 villages of Lachung Valley have been divided into 2 territorial units, namely Ketlam and Lema. The Council of Representatives, known as Lehian, consists of 2 pipons who are the head of the village. The 2 pipons in Zuma represent its territorial unit and are assisted by 2 gyapons. The pipon were originally called chipons, which literally means king of the public. Next in hierarchy to the pipon are 5 chultrimpas. There are nearly 150 to 160 households under the jurisdiction of each chultrimpa. In addition to chultrimpas, the structure of Zumsa also has provision for 6 gambos, who are mainly appointed from those who are responsible and wise people of the village. Gambos assist the pipon in carrying out their functions. They were earlier nominated by the pipons. However, under the democratic setup, they are selected by the public, but the opinion of pipon is always taken into consideration. One member from each household, called the Kiat, finds representation in the Zumsa. The other taxpayers and their families are registered family by virtue of their paying taxes to Zumsa. Functions of the Zumsa. The Zumsa has socio-cultural functions, economic functions, administrative or political functions, and other functions. Among the socio-cultural functions, Zumsa has various socio-cultural functions, especially during the rites of passage like marriage or other social functions. And they also have a very important role at the time of death. At the time of death or during natural calamities, Zumsa ensures all household supports to the deceased family. The institution also ensures collection of essential items such as rice, butter, etc. in order to meet exigencies such as earthquake and landslide. Now, as far as Zumsa functions in relation with socio-cultural functions is concerned, is that whenever any important functions are being organized, the Zumsa will always have a very important role to play. Apart from that, at the time of death of a person or during natural calamities, Zumsa or these institutions will ensure that every household support the family in distress. They will also from time to time collect essential items such as rice, butter, etc. and they will stock it in a granary or in a proper place so that whenever any natural calamities like earthquake or landslide happen, they can use those goods that they store in the granary or in the godown and they can survive with it. Now, economic functions. The economic functions of Zumsa involve collection of fines and taxes and etc. Whenever a new family is being formed, small amount of land would be donated by Zumsa to the newly formed family through Sampa. Sampa is a group of people who are specifically assigned to deal with allocation of land to the newly established family. Zumsa also ensures that its household grows vegetables for self-sustenance. In the traditional Zumsa administrative systems, the people cannot buy vegetables and others from other places. They have to grow by their own. But they are allowed to import staple food items such as onions and tomatoes because the climatic condition that they are living doesn't provide them the suitable conditions to grow such crops. Otherwise, whatever is grown in the area, they have to grow by themselves for their self-sustenance. Now let's come to administrative and political functions. The Zumsa is responsible for maintenance of law and order. Offenses and disputes are settled within the Zumsa. Zumsa has the sole authority to exercise social sanctions. The most common punishment is social boycott. Major social offenses involving the non-Lachungapas are generally referred to the police. Ordinary disputes are generally settled by customary practice of offering khada, silk calf and chan, bakal liquor. Now, other functions. Another important function of Zumsa is the distribution of developmental schemes sponsored by the center and state governments. The Zumsa has an annual meeting called the Kiasa. The people are informed about the meeting by the conventional practice of announcing from a hilltop, in which attendance of everyone is compulsory, failing which they are fined. Now, another functions of Zumsa is to distribute developmental funds equally, or to make sure that all developmental funds coming from the government reach every deserving family. And another thing is, whenever important issues came out, they will have meeting. And in the meeting, if anyone failed to turn up, they will be fined with cash, like 50 to 150 and even up to 300. But in case, if the meeting agenda is a very, very serious one, then they can be fined even up to 3,000 rupees. Now, let's come to the Lindopa of the Karbis of Karbi Anglong, Assam. From Assam state, I choose Karbis for our discussion for today's lecture. The Lindopa of the Karbis. The Karbis are the principal tribal community in the Karbi Anglong district of Assam. They are also known as Mikil, but they feel congenial to call themselves as Aleng, which means a man. The Karbis have their own traditional self-governing institutions which have 3 tiers. As in the case of the Khasis and Gentiles, the traditional administrative system of the Karbis also is 3-tier or 3-layer. The traditional system of governance is in fact monarchical, whereby the king or the Lindopa is at the apex. I mean, among the 3-tier, the Lindopa or the king is at the top, who is followed by Havai or head of the region, and at the bottom we have Sarte or headman of a village. The local level decisions are still attended by these traditional institutions, which can be termed as democratic in notion. In other words, most of the local issues are still attended by this traditional village headman, head of the region, or king of the tribe. Now let's look at the three-tile administration. The Kalbis have three-tier traditional self-governing institutions. At the apex there is the king on Lindopa, as we have said. At the middle level there is Habas, and at the bottom we have the May or village council. Now first, the king on Lindopa. In the Hamren subdivision there are three traditional local king. Actually, these institutions are tribal chief, but for them it is the king. And these kings have their own traditional jurisdiction. Among the three traditional kings that the Kalbis have, one of them rule at Rongkang, one of them at Chintong, and another one at Amri. Among the three chiefs, the Lingdok post of Ronghang is considered to be the supreme or the most powerful one. The Chintong king has two subordinate kings, and the Amri king also has two subordinate kings. Members of the Pinpomar, or the parliament of the king. We have the prime minister, the priest, the assistants, and the advisor. These are the four members of Pinpomar, or parliament of the king. Now let's come to the functions of the Lingdopa, administrative functions. The king or Lingdopa is responsible to allot eligible persons to different posts of Pinpomar, or in the cabinet. All the administrative activities are in the name of the king. And the king is also, or the institution is also responsible to conduct an annual royal durbar, where the king and the queen and also his councils are paid tributes. Then judicial functions. The king has to attend to all the social matters and to settle all disputes referred by the Habais and other Lingdopa. Now, as the Lingdopa is the head or supreme ruler of the tribe, whenever social matters or cases are handed over by the Habais, regional level chief or other two Lingdopa, it is his duty to attend to those social matters or cases and settle the matters. In a case, if a case has been settled by the Habai, that means the chief of the regional level, it is the responsibility of the Habai to inform immediately with a bottle of Halong rice beer. Now, in case any matters came up and the Habai settled the matter, so it is his duty to report to the king or the Lingdokpo about his decision. And in that case, the king or the Lingdokpo will see the matter, and if he is satisfied, it is okay. But if he is not satisfied, he can take away the case and he can settle by himself. In short, he is the ruler, the judge and guardian of the customary laws, but he is not the absolute ruler, because he has his council of ministers on whom he relies for most of the important decisions. Now the Habai. The Habai is nothing but the chief of the regional level. The ancient Kalbi kingdom had 12 administrative units, locally known as Longris, and its Longris are governed by the headman known as Habai. A king can dismiss the Habai, all the Lingdokpo can dismiss the Habai anytime if not loyal to the king and to the Pinpomer, or he is found physically unfit, or married more than one wife, or delays some trials and embraces Christianity. Now, Lingdokpa is the supreme authority among the tribe, and below him we have the Habai, and this Habai is subordinate to the Lingdokpa. So in case he married more than once, or he delayed trial of case, or he become Christianity, or he doesn't show loyalty towards the king and his council of ministers, or he is found physically unfit, then the king or the Lindopa can remove the habai. Though the habai is the primary authority in the village, he is assisted by the regional council called Longri Amai. The council consists of different members. And all this, we have expert in traditional laws, principal habai, assistant babai, organizing secretary, assistant to mutlar, one who arranges the sittings of the Longri Amai, Ferenke, and the Sartes or headman of the village. The habai settle all the local disputes with the help of the council, which are sent for final decisions to the Lindopa. Since he is the protector of the traditional laws and social order, he is supposed to be wise and responsible in his actions. Under his jurisdiction, habai looks after all the matter, civil and judicial, and can impose fines or punishments. The post of the habai is hereditarily transferred, but can be changed if he is dismissed by the Lindopa or dies, pass away without a male issue. Functions of the habai. The habai can appoint the sarte or the head of the village under him or within his jurisdiction. He have the power to appoint a gonbura or the village chief under his jurisdiction. Habai also looks after the law and order situation of his territory. Any dispute in his longri is referred by the sarte, is decided by him. In case from his jurisdiction, if a sarte or village chief transfer a case to him, it is his duty to attend to those cases. And lastly, habai also look into disputes relating to land and collective cultivation, and is also empowered to impose fine for illegal activity. Now let's come to the village council or May. Sometimes it is called May and sometimes it's called May. The traditional village council of the Karbis is called May, and this council is composed of all the elderly mere members of the village. The village council or the May consists of president and the functionaries. The council is presided by the sarte or gonbura, or the chief of the village, who is the head of the village. All the village disputes which are not of very grave or serious nature are settled by it. Now, role or functions or position of the village council. The village council or May plays an important role in regards to the social, economic and religious life of the villages. It can impose fine on the person found guilty not exceeding rupees 50 normally. In case if a person is found guilty, the May can exact fine from him, but it should not exceed rupees 50. If there is any unsettled case, it is sent to the habai or Lindopa or the district councils for final settlement. Now, in case there is a case pending and the May could not, or the village council could not settle the case, then it should be sent to the Lindopa or habai to settle the case. Now let's come to the later part of our discussion. In this section, we will discuss about youth dormitory or bachelor's dormitory system among some of the major tribes of Norris India. Dormitory system. In general, many of the tribes in Norris India has youth or bachelor's dormitory system. They call it in different names, but the main purpose of the institutions is more or less the same in all the tribes. Now we shall see some of the dormitory systems among some of the major tribes of Norris India. Number 1, Murum of the Nagas. Actually, Murum is a common name used for the bachelor's dormitory system among the Nagas, but they have their own name. Each of the tribe has their own name in their own dialect. But just to make it common, since many people have been using Murum, we will use Murum as for now. The Murum is a key institution of the Nagas and also the center of social life of all the unmarried mere members of the society. It is the place for every young boy who attains puberty, where they learn about social practices and belief from their elders till they get married. Now every young man or every young boy has to become part of the Murum, and they should learn customs, traditions, social values, religious values, and they will continue to stay in the Murum or bachelor's dormitory till they get married. The Murum is generally built on the edge of a steep slope to the highest altitude of the settlement area, so that the members can watch and protect their village from sudden raids and attack of the enemies. Normally the Murum is established or built in a raised platform or in a place which is slightly higher than the village, so that the member of the Murum can from time to time look upon the village, and they will be able to identify in case enemies are attacking the village. The Murum is the center of all social, religious and cultural life of the Nagas. The older members shoulder greater responsibilities than those who are newly admitted. Normally, the younger ones who are newly admitted in the Murum are not much aware of what they are supposed to do and what not. So the elder members in the Murum took responsibility to educate the younger ones. And once they left, those younger ones who have already become seniors will once again continue the train and so on. In short, most of the Naga tribes have boys dormitory or youth dormitory called Murum. And all the boys, once they attain puberty, will become a member of the Murum. They will learn all the social, economic and religious values in the Murum, and they will leave the Murum, all the youth dormitory, only when they get married. Now let's come to Nokpante of the Garos. In the Garo habitation, the house where unmarried male youth or bachelor live is called Nokpante. Nokpante is a house or a dormitory where the unmarried youth live together. The word Nokpante means the house of bachelors, because it is a house where the bachelors stays. Nokpantes are generally constructed in the front courtyard of the Nokma, the chief. In the case of the Nagas, the Murungs are constructed or built at a higher place so that they can see enemies coming, or they can protect the village in a much better way. But in the case of the Garos, the Nokpante, or the dormitory of the boys, the house of the bachelors, is constructed nearby the chief. The art of cultivation, various arts and cultures, and different games are taught in the Nokpante to the young boys by the senior boys and elders. As in the case of the Nagas, the young boys are taught about various arts and culture, games, and the art of cultivation by the senior members. Now let's come to Lom and Som of the Kukis. Among the Kukis, the two important traditional organizations of the youths are the institutions of Lom and Som. Lom simply means a group of youths coming together and forming a group so that they can help each other. Especially in the Zoom field, they will make a Lom, or they will make a group, and they will work together. They will share the pain and joy and everything. In other words, Som means unmarried mere members of the village, or the bachelors coming together in the house of a lady and spending the night in that house. Now let's begin with Lom. What actually is Lom? Lom literally means corporate labor or labor in rotation. It was an informal labor organization wherein all the able-bodied young boys and girls are members. In the Lom, not only boys but even the girls are part of it. All the unmarried boys and girls or male and females are part of the law. Here, young people are engaged in social activities which benefits the individual and the community as a whole. Under the system of law, every other boys and girls from each household comes together and form a group. All the members of the group work collectively as a team, helping one another on a rotational basis in each other field, irrespective of one's strengths and weaknesses. In today's world, the equivalent of law could be the youth club or youth development organizations we have these days. Every LOM has a LOM UPA, a senior member, a tolaipao, an overseer or superintendent, and a LOM tangvo, assistant superintendent. In the group or in the LOM, they will have a senior member as sort of the head. They will have a tolaipao as someone who will oversee them or who will superintend them, who will look after them, and a LOM tangvo who will be assistant to the superintendent. The LOM was also a center where young Kuki people learn discipline and social ethic. After harvest season, the LOM meet is celebrated with a LOM sale, and as a commemoration, a pillar is erected. LOM is an institution in which boys and girls engage in social activities for the benefit of the individual and the community as a whole. Now let's come to SOM. SOM as an institution among the Kukis was very unique. All the boys of the village formed into several groups, having 4 to 5 groups depending on the size of the village. In the case of LOM, one village might have only one LOM, but in the case of SOM, one village may have 4 or 5 groups, or even if the village is big enough, they can have 10-20 groups also. Each group finds a suitable place where there is an unmarried girl to stay at night, as tradition does not allow the boys to sleep in their parents' house. Now, according to tradition, an unmarried boy, once they attain the age of puberty, cannot sleep with his parents. Of course, during childhood, he will surely be with his parents, but once he attains the age of puberty, he have to leave his family and sleep in somebody else's house. So for this purpose, they will make a group, 4 or 5 groups, and each group will spend the night or will sleep in one particular house where there is an unmarried lady. SOM, a community center for boys, was the center of learning in which the SOM UPA, an elder, did the teaching, while SOMNU means the unmarried lady or the owner of the house, where the unmarried lady in the house where the SOM members used to sleep. While SOMNU took care of household chores such as combing of the boys' hair, washing of the garments, and making the beds. The best students were recommended to the king's or the chief's service, and eventually would achieve the office of Semang Pocong, ministers in the courts, and Garlam Kai, leaders, warriors in the army. Now, in the SOM and even in LOM, they will be trained of all social ethics, manners, discipline, different arts, different knowledge, oral histories, and even folk songs and folklores. And among the SOM members, the best person will become a member of the Semang Pocong or Council of Ministers of the Chief. And if he is capable enough, he might even become Galam Kai, meaning leader in terms of war. Now let's come to Farla or Zirkadam of Kirbis. The bachelor's dormitory of the Kirbis, which is variously known as the Terang, Ahem, Terang, Hamber, Farla, but more popular as Zirkadam. In short, the bachelor's dormitory of the Kirbis is known in various names, but the most popular one is Zilkedam. The Zilkedam was originally designed to include male only, but now the females are also part of it, though they could not occupy any position of importance. The dormitory is generally constructed in a center place of the village with locally available construction materials. The Zilkedam has 10 office bearers with its leader and deputy leader known as Kleng Sarpo and Kleng Dun respectively. The traditional institution is, however, gradually dying, but the spirit of offering a helping hand to the needy by the youth of a Karbi village has not yet been eroded. See, the Farla or Zilkedam of the Karbis, with changing time, since they no longer have that structure or house, it has been gradually dying out. But the spirit that they learn in that institutions to help each other in times of need, particularly among the youths, to help people who are in need within the village, has not yet been eroded. Practically, they no longer have the Falla building or structure, but the spirit of offering help to the needy people is still much alive. Thank you so much. It has been quite hectic. Some of the portions are a little bit difficult to understand, so if you have problem, please feel free to ask me. But also don't forget that I'll be giving you more notes, since I try to finish the topic in one lecture and at the same time try to make as short as possible or as short as I can. Some of the portions are not clear enough, so bear with me. But I hope you learn something, and we will continue to learn together and grow together. Thank you so much. Till we meet again in the next video.